It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I am the guy they call the Smoker Broker. In fact, even more so now than ever, we finally got to start doing some cook-offs for the first time, probably 6 months this past couple weeks. So it's actually nice to be back. You know, obviously we're having to go into the COVID restrictions where we can't have a lot of people out. So anybody thinks I didn't invite you, that's not true. We had to be very structured on who was allowed to be there, but it was nice to be out and competing again. Hadn't done it, like I said, in 6 months, so it was great.
Did you bring home any trophies?
What's that?
Did you bring home any trophies?
Well, it wasn't necessarily trophy this time around. It was more just place. But I will tell you, I came in 5th, and the 2 or 3 of the winners were professional, the guys that run Heim barbecue out there in Fort Worth, and one of the Lockhart guys. So they're pretty tough to beat. I took no shame in steak and ribs with them, and we did well in brisket too. So I guess so. They weren't handing trophies out, but it was nice to, as far as the order goes, that's where we were. It was a little bit different than it normally was, so that was kind of cool. But it was nice, man. It was nice to be back out there. One of the things that was funny, I don't normally, when I'm smoking a pork belly, usually I just smoke it and then I cube it and I let it sit for a little bit longer and it gets crispy. Well, we had the open pit. So when I was cubing them, it was completely by accident, but I dumped the damn tray onto the pit, but that fire must have been about 700 degrees. So I was like, I'm just going to torch the living hell out of these things. So we went back through, man, they were the best. That was the best piece of pork belly we'd ever had. We actually got it to where it was so black and bark on the outside, but it was like just completely, Dina hates this word, moist fat on the inside. God, it was good.
It sounds good. It sounds
funny
good.
When you're by accident, you do something. I won't say why it was by accident that I dumped it, but it was probably the obvious that I wasn't.
Well, I know it was good to be back with the boys.
It was. You know, it's funny you said that, because that was the best part, is that we were back. We were finally outside, and all of us acknowledged the fact that that was better than it had been in the last few months. So you're absolutely right. That was the best part. So that was great. Little shout out to all my Pensacola Gulf Shore friends. You know, a tough couple of days. Well, actually, still tough to this moment right now, what you're going through. But, you know, I tell you, here's the thing with hurricanes. And it's been interesting. There's been 2 over the last couple of weeks. So you have a category 4, which most people are fearful of. And, you know, almost pretty much a 5 for all that, you know, and it goes through my family's place down there in southern Louisiana. And most people are horrified of 4 and 5 category storms. But this one's living proof that it doesn't matter what the cat is. It depends on what it does. And, you know, my family in Louisiana would tell you that they would have preferred the category 4 and category 5 like they got with Laura than they would have with a category 2 or 3 like Sally or even Rita back when. Because what you find is those storms are worse. Those people in Pensacola right now, they will tell you there is nothing funny about that storm being a category 1 or a category 2. They are indulged with water right now.
Absolutely.
And for those people that have never gone through that in Pensacola, I mean, they've gone through storms, but probably not one as bad as that with rain. It won't get much better for a few weeks. That water is going to sit. It's going to have to drain. They're going to have to redo all those homes. They're not going to have fresh water for another probably 2 or 3 weeks. There is nothing fun about that type of situation. It's kind of a good learning perspective for people who talk about a storm that's really not bad or you like you see a category 1, you're like, oh, it won't be that much of a problem. The folks in Houston will tell you one of the worst things that ever happened to them was a tropical storm when Allison came through years ago. When those things sit, it sucks. Those are the worst type of storm. So a little bit of Hurricane 101 there. It's not the category size, it's what the damn thing does. And we have lots of friends, of course, in the Gulf Coast, certainly all my family in southern Louisiana, but we have lots of friends in the Gulf Shore, Pensacola area. Very hard for them this morning. Very hard for them to have to be going through and dealing with the inconvenience that they are going to have probably for the next month or two. And they're not even done yet. Anytime you're in this type of weather pattern, they just keep coming. So there's probably 2 or 3 more storms out there for them. So tough times for those folks on the Gulf Coast. I hope they're doing well. We actually have, Bo and Stephanie, former agents of ours that had to move, and they're just southeast of Destin. They had to go through this last night. They had some pretty significant pictures.
Oh, really?
You see those pictures of the water that Stephanie is posting? That was pretty eye-opening for those guys.
Yeah.
So I feel tough for them. Hopefully everything goes, and it's not easy, the fact that COVID is really, complicating the matters either. There's a lot of people that are already trying to social distance, and, now they're being forced into some type of public housing or some type of hotel. That's just not something that goes very well for any of the Gulf Coast right now.
Not fun at all.
No, even Texas right now from the earlier storms is still having to fight that. So tough time for all those people. COVID continues to make things horrifically life-changing and inconvenient. You throw in, normal things such as hurricanes, and it just gets that much worse. So continue to fight the battle with COVID that we're going to continue to see over and over again. Seems like it's starting to stabilize itself, probably because everybody that could have gotten sick has pretty much come close to it already. Doesn't mean you still can't. Just means that the numbers aren't going as high because majority of the people, it's across the globe by now, and the numbers are starting to stabilize. I did find it funny that the CDC made a comment yesterday. Not that I'm crazy about anything the CDC says these days. I really don't know whether they're trustworthy or not. Just an opinion, not a fact. But they did mention they've almost got to the point where they think the mask are so important that it even will be stronger repellent than the vaccine itself. I don't know how to take that. I go, so are you saying the vaccine is not something that's that strong? Are you saying you believe that much the mask is that much stronger? Or are you just trying to scare people to wear a mask? It's a tough road there because, the more people I see these days, it's a mix. There are some people that are like, I don't want to have the damn thing on. I don't believe it works. There are a lot of people that say, look, the mask work. It's proven. You should have them on. I'm not saying which one's right or wrong. I wear the mask because that's what I'm told to do, and I wear it. But it's hard when I have good friends that say they're not wearing it because you want to say, well, you really should. But then I'm like, am I the person that should tell them that? Am I really the one? I'm not their dad. Am I the one who should be telling them they should have a mask? What if they're right and I'm wrong? Are we all really that much medical professionals these days that we can actually answer for whether the mask is right? By the way, I'm wearing it because I do believe that there is some help there, but is it like a completely fixing everything? No, I don't think so. And do I think some of the rules are kind of silly when you walk into a restaurant and you have it on, but then you take it off when you sit down? It's kind of awkward. I don't know what to think about that.
Steps to walk into a restaurant and sit at your table. You're wearing it for about, like I said, 5 steps. I wear mine all the time, like you. I don't enjoy doing it, but I do.
Yeah, I do it because I think
it's walk the right thing. Parking lot nonstop about 4 or 5 times a day. But
yeah, well, to my friends that don't wear it, I got a lot of them. Here's the only thing I'll say on the other side of it. Someone like me who talks a lot, especially if I'm in a group setting or having some type of presentation. I mean, I do tend to spit sometimes, and the mask does stop that. It's kind of gross to say that, but it's a fact. The mask does stop it. So when you're talking to someone close by, I mean, if you do have any type of contagious, it can help. You can't sit there and argue that it can't do it.
I walk into about 3 different homes a day of people who I have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
So I do wear my mask, especially in that situation.
It's the right thing. But to tell someone they have to wear it, I don't know about if that's right either. So it continues to be the more modern battle with COVID is how do we do that and how do we respond to people? You still see the people in the store who have the mask on, but it's under their nose. I'm like, well, that's kind of defeating the purpose.
Well, I had some homeowners that were in the home and they didn't have them on. I had mine on there. Like, do we need to wear ours? It's like, you do what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm making sure that I don't get it, and
Yeah, I was
because
like, I'm doing this for your protection. So
that's right. That's right. I don't want to be the one that's held responsible for. I came in here without a mask. I didn't disinfect or put anything I touched. So that's definitely the right thing for all the agents who are watching right now. That's and who will watch. That's the important piece there. It's not what we believe. It's to make sure that nobody comes back and says that we didn't follow procedure, and that's our job. Our personal beliefs, I will say, when it comes to real estate, that is not something that you're given the choice on. It is company policy anywhere that you go right now. Well, and city policy too, that you have it on. So we're not telling you whether it's the right thing or not. We're telling you need to have it on to conduct the business that you need to do. I do find the conversation funny about the people who have been asked to leave if they have a mask on and they say, I have a right to stay here. I'm like, yeah, easy. I don't know about that. But right back at them, they have the right to not put the mask on too. Again, I have a good friend. I had dinner with good friends this past week, and they were very structured on not wearing the mask, and I respect it. As far as I know, they might be right. So it's really interesting to see the continued battle about whether we should have them on or whether we should have them off. It's a very tough thing. I know I put them on because, just like I said, what I'm told, but like I said, many friends that are totally against it, not wearing it, no vaccine, and I'm not going to argue with them because they might be right. Maybe I'm wrong, and I respect their procedures in place. So again, we continue to talk about this because those of you who think we just want to have a COVID discussion, you're wrong. We talk about it because it affects what we do day to day. For instance, and just talking about it right now, one of the things that's become interesting as well when we're showing a house is someone who has a medical condition or some type of asthma that's been excused from wearing the mask. And how do you handle that person? If you're going to, be critical of them not having the mask on, they've been told they don't have to have it on if they have certain medical requirements. So that's another thing I'm starting to see. Whereas if you're judgmental about that, that can be a problem. So you have to be real careful. I'm almost of the opinion that I'm going to say this carefully. It's none of your business because people say, yeah, it is my business because I can die from it. So I know that's the response there. But in the end, it's those people's freedoms too. So I'm not giving an opinion either way. I honestly don't know what's right or wrong. I know I do what I'm told, but to sit there and say the other person's wrong, I can't do that. I can't do that, and that makes it a little difficult when we're out there. Just like Mark said, what spurred this conversation, do we have to have the mask on? Well, no, I'm doing this so I protect you. I mean, we're not taking chances on someone saying, well, you didn't have it on. I probably got it from this guy.
And let me clarify too, those are, I'm a photographer, so those are the homeowners that are in the house when I'm taking the photos. Now, when I'm going out on a call, a showing rather, I do let my clients know that they do need to be wearing a mask because, again, it's per MLS.
Yeah, we have to tell them we can't go in. We can be just held responsible. So we have to tell them if they can't do it, just like any public place right now. We have to tell them, hey, we can't do it if that's what you're going to want to do. So if you need someone that is going to do it, you have to find somebody else. We're not going to break those rules. We're not going to get caught not having a mask on, nor you having the mask on. So,
and while we have transitioned into more of fist bumps when we meet, there's still a lot of people that do like to shake hands. And so I certainly do that. I am diligent about using some hand wash afterwards, but that's something that might take a while.
CDC has been very prominent about the fact that they're convinced that it's not off the hands that you get it unless you stick it in your eyes or your mouth, which you shouldn't be doing anyways. So if you're shaking somebody's hand or touching grocery carts, as long as you wash your hand after or some type of sanitizer, most of the health organizations are pretty across the board unanimously saying that should keep it away. So I think that that's fine. Now, with that said, I'm still very careful when I meet someone. I actually give them the choice. I'm like, hey, are you a handshaker or not?
Okay.
Some of them say no. Some of them say, yeah, I am. So to each their own. But that's the one. Notice how the city's having clamped on saying you can't shake somebody's hand. Most of them are aware that medically it shouldn't transfer that way if your hands are clean and you're not touching your face right after you touch somebody. So, and it's almost like the rules are more difficult. It's almost like the rules on what we're supposed to do and keep up with are more difficult. Yeah, I still forget to have the mask on sometimes when I go into like the gas station. That's why I started wearing it like this, just so if I forgot, I pulled it up.
I need to get me one of those because I'm telling you, I go
like
to my car 5 times a day.
I like the Gators better because, first of all, I find them more comfortable, and it's easier to talk with. My glasses don't fog up as much. The other ones tend to hurt my ears when they're wrapped around it. So I like the Gator. I think the Gator is easy to, just pull up like that. So I've been wearing it.
Did you get that online, or is that from your kids'
This
school?
is actually Dina's for the Lake Dallas School District. They had them, so she gave them to me. Funny, I was sponsoring this morning, and I had it has Eagles on it, and someone says, "You're an Eagle fan?" I'm like, "Oh God, I didn't even think about that. I need to take this off. This isn't working right." So kind of backfired on me there. Okay, so enough with COVID. Enough with talking about everything else that's going on in the general world right now. Let's talk about appraisals. Good show today. This is a really good show. It's one of the best ones we do because it's probably one of the most useful ones you can have when you get out there and you start dealing with problems in the real estate world. Now, this show is good because not only does it address the new agents that are just starting that haven't seen this type of stuff, it addresses existing agents, veteran agents, everybody, the general public, how they don't understand. In fact, those of the agents that watch the show, which are a lot of them, this is a good show. If you're having problems with appraisals and you need your client to better understand, have them watch the show because we're going to tell you exactly like it is with how this stuff works. And you need to be educated on how the system works so that you can give the right information to your clients. So it's a really good show. Didn't introduce him earlier, but he usually doesn't need one. Mark Cox, my buddy over here to the side, fantastic real estate agent, definitely one of my higher up agents, actually runs our Fort Worth division with recruiting out there. So he is an important person in the SWR Keller Williams world, does an outstanding job with that. And he's a pretty damn good real estate agent on his own. He has a very similar background to me, coming from corporate. He's utilized that to transfer into a successful real estate career, and you're very fortunate to have him if he is your real estate agent. And if he's not your real estate agent and you're friends with him, that's pretty foolish because the guy's really smart and he has a lot of responsibility inside of our group as well, which is why he is on the show. We want people on the show who know what they're doing, who've seen this before. We're not just putting someone over here that started yesterday and is learning how to do this. So,
well, it's good to be back. It's been a long time since I've been on the show.
Yeah, I feel bad. It's not like I hadn't invited you. We just
no every week. Yeah, I've been working a lot.
Well, I'm glad. Well, it's a good thing too. We want you working. I mean, I think I'm the biggest advocate. I'd rather you be working, and real estate comes when it needs to. So I love that you handle all the stuff that you got going on, and you always do it in a really good manner. He's also on because he is an expert in appraisals. He's been there before when it's gone down. He knows what it's like when the appraisal doesn't come in, and he's going to help with that conversation. He's probably going to point out some things that I.
In fact, I've got a couple right now going. The appraisal just came back yesterday. This is a house in Farmers Branch that was remodeled, and quite frankly, it was overpriced in my opinion. The comps that I ran, it was like $20,000 overpriced. So we bid $15,000 below. They accepted our offer during the. Actually, when they accepted our offer too, though, I told her up front, the listing agent, I said, "Hey, we're going to accept your counter offer with the expectation that if it doesn't appraise, that the seller is going to be coming down on the price. We're not going to be coming up to match or doing anything like that." Turns out, and then we go through the inspection repairs, and we get $7,000 back from that because there was issues with the house. We got the appraisal back last night, and it actually came in $29,000 over what we paid.
That is rare.
I know. So I was going to ask you. I'm not obligated to tell them the appraisal price at all. Correct?
That's a good question.
Should they be asking? Because I know she's going to.
That's a good question. If I'm on the buy side for a buyer agent, or I'm the buyer agent, and my buyer asks, hell yeah, I'm going to tell them because if it's up, because I want them to have a lot of faith in it. You're getting a really good deal. If I'm the listing agent, I'm probably a little more careful about telling them that because they get perception-wise, they start thinking that they were cheated and we didn't get them as much as we should have. And the honest truth is, and it's a theme of the show today, there's no consistency in the appraiser. We don't know that thing's coming back. We just want to make sure the damn thing comes over. So if they come back and say it was 30K more, they could have easily said it was 30K short. So there's really no stock to put in that. So my answer to you is I probably avoid it with the seller, and I probably try to get away with, hey, just made value. I'm not sure what else they had out there. You can always call and let them have the opportunity. But here's the thing, it really doesn't matter. It has nothing to do, nothing can be done about it. And the fact that you're telling a seller that so they can come back and with an excuse when it's not a valid excuse, why should that be told in the first place? That seller, they don't understand how that appraiser works. So it's hard for me to go and tell them, hey, they came in 30K over. And they're like, well, that means we didn't get enough for them. Like, that's not true. That guy or gal could have done anything. Someone could have said it was $30,000 lower. I just don't think it's worth the argument, because
Right.
the next response is that. And I'm like, it's very possible that couldn't have been done right. In fact, after I looked at it and I did the comps, I don't think they're right. That's going to be a good conversation today too, talking about, is the appraiser actually correct or not? Because it means something in this part of the transaction. All right, so let's talk about some of the general. What is an appraisal? So an appraisal is something that the lender is going to require for the obvious reason. If they're going to give you $300,000, they're going to loan you $300,000, and the house is the house is under contract at $350,000, and they're giving you a $300,000 loan. They want to make sure that the house is actually worth $350,000. They're not going to give you money on an asset that's devalued before they give you that money. So if they're going to give it to you, they're going to make sure that it meets value. So that's why this appraisal is done. A lot of people are confused by the fact that they think that it's the buyer that hires the appraiser. That's not true. It's the lender who hires the appraiser. The appraiser actually works for the lender, not the buyer. It's the lender who's requiring it. Okay, buyer pays for it, which is weird that they pay for it. They don't work for them, but that's the fact. They work for the lender. Now, this is important in our later conversation here, because when we start talking about that, when people start having issues with the appraiser, there are certain barriers that we have to talk with an appraiser. Due to the Frank Dodd Act 5 or 6 years ago, we cannot personally address or have influence on an appraiser. So all these things we're about to talk about are very difficult, because they're when something goes wrong and we want to reach out to the appraiser, but we can't. So we have to go through the lender, and then the lender has to go through the appraiser. It's almost like a middleman. So that's not the best situation that we deal with. So we're going to talk a lot about that too. Of course, the appraisal is ordered by the lender, not the buyer who orders it. And they're going to go out there. This part, Mark, walk them through the process. When is it that we're doing the appraisal? What's happened before we get to the appraisal?
Usually I don't have the lender order the appraisal, or my buyer pay for the appraisal until we get through the inspections negotiations or the repairs.
And what's the common sense behind that? Why do we do that?
Because if the deal's going to be broken over the repairs, then you just wasted $500 on an appraisal.
That's right. And at what point are we looking at doing the appraisal? What's the time frame? How many weeks after we got under contract?
I mean, hopefully a week or less, because it usually takes about 48 hours to have it inspected, another 48 hours to have the negotiations. And so by the 5th or 6th day, you should be ordering the appraisal. Sometimes, especially in this environment, it takes a week or maybe even 2 for them to get out there, and then another 3 or 4 days to write up the report.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that not only is it done after the inspection period's over, but it's also done, it's still extra time that's giving the buyer to say, hey, look, am I right here? Is everything, there's plenty of barrier time between when that appraisal is done that the buyer could have done something. So why waste the money on the appraisal earlier if there's still remorse, if there's still inspections? Those things need to get themselves worked out.
Plus, on the third-party financing, I usually put 21 days for the buyer to be able to get approval from their lender. So it needs to be done within that 21-day period.
So let me tell you something a little bit about that. I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I want to separate. It's not necessarily true the way you said that. The 21-day period is for the actual approval, the finance approval, okay? The property, the appraisal, it's viewed more as a property condition. So if it goes after. I'm glad you brought this up because this is a key point here. If the appraisal comes in after the 21 days,
You can still back out if it doesn't appraise.
That's right. Because remember, the first part of the third party is saying, are you approved? The approval has nothing to do with whether the house appraises. It has to do with whether you personally have any issues out there that they have an issue with. The property in itself is a property condition, which says, well, these people are approved, but the property condition isn't what we need it to be, so we can't give the money out. So, yes, you can go after the 21 days. Now, what's great about the way you said that, and you so innocently said it, that's why we're going to talk about that appraisal addendum, because that's why they put that in there, so that there are choices that can be eliminated even if it's after the 21 days to see if you're serious about the house. So we're going to talk about that.
Only on conventional, not FHA or VA?
What about that? What'd you say?
I said, is that only on conventional that you could do that, not FHA or VA?
That's sad. I need to check, but I think you're right. I think it is. I think it only allows it on the conventional. I'll have to check on that. That's something I should know, but I forgot I think they changed the wording of that document. I want to be sure, but I think you're right. In fact, if you can, are you able to pull it up while we're on here, or is it too difficult for you?
Yeah,
if it's too much, don't worry about it. I'd like to know that to make sure we advise everybody right, because that's something I constantly forget, whether they can do that with the government loans or not. So let's make sure that's out there. I'm pretty sure that you're right on that. So you have all these alternatives out there, and this is why we do it. This is why the appraisal's done. This is why we're going through this process. We'll look at a couple questions here. Tara said, would you order appraisals if you can't get reasonable comps? Okay, so actually, Tara, that's a good way to start our next conversation. She's asking, do we order the appraisal if we know the comps aren't good? So that question actually goes before we even put this contract in place. Before we put this contract in place or this offer in place, you guys are instructed to go through comps to make sure that the house is of reasonable value. And this is for both sides. If you're the listing agent, you're going to make sure it's reasonable. And if you're the buyer agent, you're going to make sure it's reasonable. Because if the comps you do on the house show that the house is overpriced, before an offer is made, there has to be a conversation, which is the obvious, as to what happens if this doesn't make value. Because from what we're looking at, it's not going to make value. So why are we going to wait to have a conversation we already know we think we might have? And we might get lucky, but we're not going to put our judgment on that. So the question becomes, and this is a great takeaway for the show, if you're going to draft an offer up as a buyer agent and you know those comps show that house is listed too high, you better damn well have had the conversation with everybody involved, especially your buyer, that says there's a good chance that this house will not appraise, which means this contract's no good unless you guys decide to do one of the alternatives that we're about to talk about. Okay? Would you order the appraisal if you can't get reason? Yeah. And that answer becomes more self-explanatory. At that point, you should know if the comps are bad. If you're ordering it, that's fine. You can order it, but you better have had the conversation that if it doesn't go through, everybody knows what's going to happen. And like I said, that's going to be the rest of the show where we talk about the alternatives. Okay. So that's a great transition from us getting into this conversation into that one. So kind of hang tight on that one, Terry. You've got the gist of it, but now I'm going to tell you the examples because it makes a difference on how we're going to respond to that. All right. Under contract at $300,000. Appraisal comes in at $290,000. We have a problem. What are the alternatives that we can do? All right, Mark.
You have a few options. Either the buyer can come up and pay that $10,000 difference,
which they're not going to be thrilled about, right?
No, but if there's multiple offers, they may have to do that.
Maybe.
The seller can come down to the 290 or 390, and then they're
not going to be happy about.
And they can meet in the middle, 5 and 5,
which is the ultimate, right?
And that's I think in most cases happens quite a bit.
Yeah, and then you have two other alternatives. One's the obvious, and it's the worst one. Falls apart.
Right.
You also have the option where you can have questions submitted to the appraiser via the lender asking them why they use certain comps. and were those the best comps or not. Okay.
True. And
So
a lot
we
of
talk
times,
about each of these.
a lot of times it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. I had an appraisal that was off by like 17,000, and we questioned it, and it turns out the appraiser was like brand spanking new. She had been doing it for a few months, and we were able to get another 10 grand on the appraisal.
All right, so hold on to that because that's going to be one of the choices we talk about in depth here. Okay, let's talk about the first one, the seller lowers. Listed at 300K, under contract at 290. Let's say the market's not so great. It's not a seller's market, and sellers starting to get nervous that this isn't going to happen. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a seller's market. It can be a property that's just not selling so well. One of our agents that's watching right now, I won't mention her name, but she had the same issue. Her house is a great house, but it was not selling. And if the appraisal had come in low, it might have. I don't even remember. I don't think it did. No, it didn't because we were already low. But if the appraisal had come in low, I guarantee you she would have had to make some decisions that maybe she wasn't thrilled about. So sometimes it can be the seller side of it that they have to decide. It's not just a slam dunk whether they'll do that. Depends on their situation, right? Buyer, if the value comes in, they can say they're going to pay the difference. I don't know anybody in the world that's okay with agreeing to a contract and getting it in writing, and then they're okay with giving an extra 10K because the deal didn't come in like it did. Most buyers won't be happy with that, but just like the seller, they have choices. They can decide whether they want to lose the house because there's a shortage of houses right now, or is it better for them just to bite the bullet and pay it so they can move on? I will tell you, most buyers bite the bullet right now because housing is short and they don't want to risk not having that house. So a lot of times you'll see this right now, okay? Not good for either side of that. The buyer doesn't like it and the seller doesn't like it. The ultimate solution is where they split it. Buyer says that they'll come up X amount, seller says they'll come down X amount, and they get it done. Agents might even get involved in that too, which they shouldn't, but if it's necessary.
I've had to do it before to save a deal.
Well, something's better than nothing, right?
Yep.
Isn't that the rule that we use?
It is.
Sometimes you do have to make those adjustments. All right. Then you have, like I said, the worst case scenario. The deal falls apart, which just sucks because now you've just wasted time that you'll never get back, and money for that matter too. And then, of course, you have the ability to question the appraisal. So I want to talk more about that process on the value because that's what really drives this particular show is to how did we get here in the first place? Why is it that the appraisal didn't match? Something wasn't right. We already discussed we should have done comps, both agents. So we should have known where the house was. So why is it that we're so surprised by this right now? It is amazing how many owners come up to me and they're bitter about this because they're like, I didn't know this would happen. I'm like, yeah, you did. You just weren't listening when I told you. We talked about the expectations here and now you're in it, but you weren't listening the first time. Now you are. So sometimes they'll say, well, forget it. I'm just going to go put it back on the market. I'm like, and be in the same boat? You're just going to go right back to where you before. You're not really getting away from this. We hadn't talked about on the government loans, the FHA and VA, those values, they're documented in there for the next 6 months. So the next person who comes in, if they're going FHA or VA, they'll be able to see that. So you're not running from the appraisal. You might think you are, but you're not. So for them to get all angry and say they're going to go elsewhere, excuse me, this should not be being tired. I got an allergy shot, and I'm telling you, it has put my ass down. I don't know what it was. I don't know if they put more in it, but I slept good last night, and I feel like I'm about to drop on this keyboard right now. So not boredom for sure. I wouldn't be bored on my own show. It's terrible drowsiness from those allergy shots this morning. It's not very good for me right now, so I apologize for that, especially on such an important topic like this. So let's start getting into how this looks when we start trying to figure out how we're going to do it, because it all is based off the value of the home. Let's see. Alan said bad appraisal means time to tune up your negotiation skills. Yeah, because everybody should have known. Everybody should have known the value. And a bad appraisal shouldn't be a surprise unless there was an incompetent appraiser. Everybody should have known where that house was going to come in at, unless the appraiser doesn't know what they're doing, which unfortunately does happen from time to time. Now, this show a lot of times gets taken out of context because it kind of adheres to that the appraisers are bad, they don't know what they're doing, and the appraiser's the bad guy. That's not true. Most appraisers I know are very confident, very good at what they do. It's the few bad apples that give the whole bunch a bad name. And those are the ones we're talking about right now to protect yourself, to make sure you're dealing with that individual the right way. Just like Mark said, they found out the appraisal that was done bad a few weeks ago or whenever it was, the appraiser was new, which means they didn't know what they were doing. And thank God somebody over there was smart enough to say, you know what, you're right. This shouldn't be like this. I can tell you most of the time that doesn't happen. Those of you that think that you can have success with telling the appraiser to switch it, this is what this looks like. They go through, they do the appraisal, they use their ultimate competent knowledge that they have, they submit it to where like 7 or 8 people have already seen it. Then you come back in and say, oh, this wasn't done right. These should have been in there, and that's not.
Doesn't go
How do you
so
think
well.
the appraiser feels about that? Yeah. Does that not look like, so let me get this straight. You're telling me that I'm incompetent and I did this wrong and that you did it right and I should change it. Now, y'all, we live in a very human world. Most people of that candor will not be very receptive to being told they were wrong or that they were an idiot.
Nobody wants to
Most
be
people are
told
going
they're
to say,
doing
you're
their
the one
job
who's
wrong.
wrong. Well, Mark?
So nobody wants to hear they're doing their job wrong.
Nope. And it just puts resentment, which is what you're trying not to do with that particular appraisal. So those of you out there that think that, telling the appraiser they did wrong, you got another thing coming. Now, I will give you another takeaway from this particular show because it's important. When it comes to telling an appraiser whether they did wrong, the point we're trying to make, you're not going to have much success on fighting this on the back end after it's already done. Where you should be fighting it is on the front end before they get into that house. And what I mean by that is it's a good idea, in my opinion, to have some type of informative brochure holder or binder that's left at the house for the appraiser that says something along the lines of, hey, these are the comps that I used if it helps you. You're the boss. You're the one that's going to set the value. In no way trying to persuade you. I just wanted you to see what I see.
And honestly, I think that's what the listing agent did on this appraisal from yesterday. Because I'm pretty confident, because we spoke at the beginning when we were making the offer, my comps did not match her comps. I use a pretty strict comp, the one that you kind of taught us, plus or minus 200 square feet of the subject property within a quarter of a mile and within the past 6 months.
Right.
And I don't think she used those parameters. I think she left her comps on the table that were up towards that 300 mark range.
Yeah.
Which is probably why it came in.
Well,
the house was a nice job on the remodel, but still the neighborhood didn't provide those numbers. I don't think.
Well, and we're going to talk about the detail because that's the heart of the show, is making sure they understand why are we off. But I will tell you with the comment that you just made, one of my biggest objections, and this sounds a little bit conceited, but it's not. It's factual. It's proven factual information. Now, I don't care too much for when a 2-year appraiser tells me that their value is better than mine. Okay? I've done it for 20 years. I do expertise in the area. I'm well aware of what the value of that house should be. It's very hard when a new appraiser tells me, well, that's the value because they went to school and somebody told them that's how it goes into this matrix. Like, there's much more to that matrix than what you just put in there. You just don't know that. But it's very hard when you're trying to have it fixed where someone like me's questioned on that. I'm like, so let me get this straight. I've done it for 20 years, sold all these houses, have all these people that work with me that sell houses, and this person just got out of some appraisal school, and we're going to go with their value versus ours. I go, do I got it right? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I don't even think the people that have common sense, it makes very much sense to them. I think even they would object to them, like, that just sounds stupid. And that's why the Frank Dodd Act is very tough, because it wasn't written very strong for true experience and professionals. Now, I'm going to give you another takeaway from the show, and I've begged somebody to use it over the years because I still think I'm right with it, but there'd be a lot of improvement to the appraisal process if they added what we call a plug in the numbers, which means in accounting, it's like an acceptable rate of difference to where everything's fine. Remember, the reason why we're doing these appraisals is to make sure that the lender adequately feels that the price is worth the amount of money that they're going to go ahead and loan for, or that they're willing to give. And when you're making that type of assurance, that's why the appraisal is done. But this stuff about the appraisal having value issues because it's off by $1,000, the whole reason that appraiser is there is to make sure that no fraud's being committed between the agents, to where the agent lowered it and the buyer agent agreed to get someone in there, and then they split the profits with it later. Those are easy to detect. If they would just use a 5% plug, which means that the house is like $100K and it comes in at $96,000 under the acceptable plug, they would say, hey, look, it's close enough. There's no reason to go through this. But instead, they create all this dilemma and this drama over something being offered for $4,000, because the whole purpose is to make sure fraud's not happening. But now it's not a matter of fraud. It's just a matter of stupid details, the way the system was built. And that's a big piece of this problem, is them knowing that there's nothing wrong with it. If the value comes in $30,000, should we be looking at it? You bet. Absolutely. How is it that the two professionals got this contract signed off on and it's off by $30,000? That is a case that should be looked at saying, what the hell did y'all look at? But when it's off $3,000 or $4,000, that is not easy to do. That's very hard to accept, that someone's going to be cheated out of living where their family wants to live because the real estate agents couldn't understand the law itself, and they take it subjectively and worded it the way they wanted to. That is a big problem that we have. All right, before I always like to make sure we're getting toward time, almost at the end of the show. It goes so fast. I want to make sure that we mention our primary vendor and sponsor for the SWR group out of Keller Williams. That would be Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. We have a lot of choices as to who we use as far as inspectors go, but our group specifically uses Martin. We give choices. We usually give 3 to the general public to make sure they're the ones that look through everything. But we do push Martin a little bit more, simply because he's done it for so long. We've never had any issues with him. We consider him a very good professional and a very good friend as well. So we enjoy passing his name along. Again, that's Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. His number is right below me there at 817-401-3240. And we always appreciate him sponsoring the show. A lot of our agents focus in on Martin when they go to find an inspector. And it's nice to be able to send that business to someone that we're very comfortable that we know will do the job correctly. So there's Mark's bio up there, and all the things that he's done. You can see he has a little bit of a military background in there, which is also super impressive. But we thank Martin for everything. Always appreciate you, buddy. And we'll definitely talk with you soon. All right, we got about another 10 minutes. So let's talk about why is it that we're off in this comp value? How did this happen in the first place? So obviously, as a listing agent, that's where it starts. Mark, walk them through it so I don't have to talk through it all. Walk them through the listing agent, what they do before they put the house up. What is it that they did to see where they're at? You actually just said it, but repeat.
So when you're pulling up comps, you want to find a home that is close to your subject property. So I usually go 1/4 mile. Again, square footage is what they're mainly looking at too. So you want to be plus or minus 200 square foot of the subject property, because someone who's buying a $3,000 home is not going to be looking at a 4,000 square foot home or a 2,000 square foot home. And then additionally, you want to have it within the past 6 months, because, real estate is like the stock market. It goes up and down, and, within 6 months is fine, but we don't want to be looking at houses that sold 3 years ago.
That's right.
And then you also need to get at least 3 sold homes in order for it to be a good comp.
Well, I agree.
Well, you want to have a decent sample size. You can't just have 1 sold in the past 6 months to be able to get a true value.
What's the other reason why we want at least 3 on there? What's going to happen when the appraiser gets in there?
Well, they're going to want to compare.
They want 3 properties as well.
Yeah.
Do they stop if there's only 2 properties out there? Do they stop with comps?
No, I think what they do is instead of a quarter mile, they'll just go to a half a mile and then 3/4 of a mile until they get at least 3 comps.
Which means the room for error becomes greater.
Right, because it's not the same neighborhood, could be a different builder,
So that's what I was going for. Mark's summary there is really needs to be in the same area. And when we say in the same area, probably should be in the same subdivision. You have to be careful when you talk about the same subdivision. Some subdivisions have different sections that are what we call decade impaired. Like you might have Oakmont 1 that was built in the 70s, Oakmont 2 that was built in the 80s and 90s, and then you have Oakmont 3 that was built in the 2000s. These are very different. You couldn't comp Oakmont 1 to Oakmont 3. So that's a good takeaway from the show. Even if you're inside the subdivision, you guys can't go through, and you have to stay as close as you can, because every time you start going outside that subdivision, it's going to become more difficult to get the correct value. Okay. So that's one thing in there. Trying to see if there's any more questions on there. Okay. We talked about the age. We want to make sure the age is correct. Same thing with the decades of where the house is at. We want to make sure the size is close. Mark did a good one. It's not set in stone, but Mark is correct that we want to be within 200 square feet. Because y'all, just for anybody who's out there in the general public that watches the show, 200 square feet is a big deal. You do realize like one of your kids' rooms is like 10 by 10, right? That's 100 square feet. That's a whole room. When you start talking about 200, you're talking about 2 whole rooms, maybe a game room, maybe a full formal and dining room. It makes a difference. So those of you who are metrically inclined and don't have a very good understanding of measurements, 200 square feet is a big deal. One of my favorites is when I do a listing and I tell the people what the house is worth, and they're like, well, wait a minute, John and Tina got $500K and their house sucks compared to ours. And I'm like, who the hell is John and Tina? They're like, the house next door that sold a couple months ago. I go, the one that was like 2,000 square feet? I go, are you kidding me? I'm not kidding about my allergies. They're bad.
Bless
So I go, 2,000 square feet? I go, you're not even in the same universe as that particular individual. Well, Mark, you have to help me out. So 2,000 square feet is a different universe completely. You cannot sit there and compare those houses, but this is the obstacles that we run across. This is the one that we run across where you have someone sitting there who makes a general observation and they say, well, this is fine. I'm like, no, it's not. Okay, so it has to be close. The appraiser hopefully is looking for the same thing. Now, as we get into our last 5 minutes, again, this conversation could stretch out a lot longer. We're just hitting the high points. Here's the greatest takeaways from the show right now. Here's the biggest problem that's happened over the last few years, and it is recent. For the longest time, appraisers appraised the house the same way we did. They looked at the age of the house, they looked at the square feet, and that was what really drove the comp, was what the square feet was. We wanted similar square feet for the reason that we just gave. And for years, that's how we did it. Well, the Dodd Act started allowing what we call collateral underwriter review, which basically gave the appraiser the power to actually value upgrades in the house. See, up until like 5 years ago, a lot of you are surprised by this. Up until 5 years ago, we didn't actually give a damn how many upgrades you had in your house. Even if you had, I'll use my little photo things that Nina gives me. So like, let's say these 2 houses go on the market, all right? They go on the market and they're the exact same house, except this one has 50,000 cave upgrades and this one doesn't. When that thing hits the market, in previous years, they're going to sell close to the same. The only difference is this one probably will sell faster. All right, that's been true for many years. But what they finally decided to do, they said that, look, that's not right. If someone's put more into their house, then they should get more. And most of us agreed with that. So they finally said, we're going to let the appraiser give value. But they also said that the appraiser can do what, Mark? They can give value, but they can also do what to it?
To lose value.
They can take it away. And now we started getting into where we had subjectivity. We had subjectivity to the appraisal, meaning now we're doing our comps based off of square feet, and our guys are not accounting for the upgrades. And if you want a simple answer as to why our guys don't calculate the upgrades, it's because they can't. They don't know what the granite cost. They don't know what the hardwood cost. They're not professional in that standpoint. Most of them don't know how many piers were put into the foundation, how much value that added, or a new roof. They're not qualified. And by the way, neither is the appraiser. And that's my biggest objection. I started the call off with that the appraiser, they get viewed to be a bad guy, and they're not. Most of them are super smart. The majority of them are, and they do a good job. But this collateral review, where it gives them the subjectivity, for them to sit there and tell me that the granite in the kitchen, they gave a $3,000 credit, when I know for a fact, and we have a receipt that the granite cost $7,000 3 months ago, who's right? Them or me?
You
when
are.
An appraiser goes and looks at your pool that you just spent $75,000 on, and they give you $30,000. Why? By the way, my appraisal friends will tell you there is no set instructions that they use to get value. They just go off the hip. Some will argue, they say it's the square feet. That's ridiculous. They're doing their best to say it's worth this much. And the honest truth is they cannot predict that accurately. And if they can't predict it accurately, neither can we, which means we are going to have differences in this process. We're having appraisers out there that are saying we're giving granite this much value, and we have agents out there saying, I'm not even looking at the granite. I'm just saying that the size of the house sells at this much over the last 6 months to the last year or so. That presents a problem for us. That's the problem that we have. We started the show with telling you what the problems are. Then we started telling you what are the situations that cause issues. And now we're telling you how we get to that point. And that's why we started to show off with the alternatives. But now we're telling you, well, how does it happen in the first place? The bottom line, it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do. With the values being subjective, giving the appraisers credit, it's easy to mess it up. Now, what we have addressed our agents with, we now tell them that we don't expect them to give value for upgrades, but we do expect them to acknowledge if we comp the house at $300,000 and the other houses we comped were a lot nicer, we make it clear to the seller, hey, look, we've got you at $300,000, but that's compared to all these houses that had a lot of upgrades. You need to be prepared when that appraisal gets done. It's very possible that they take value away from you because you don't have those upgrades.
Right.
That's what we change. That's the biggest takeaway for a lot of even the pre-existing agents or even the ones that are closer to veteran. That's the change that we've made to keep up with this process. It's not perfect, but at least it gives us a heads up as to whether we're going to have problems or not. Let's see. David said smart to provide the appraiser a list of all the improvements. Yes. In that binder, David's asking whether we should list any of the improvements that have been made. Absolutely. And I'm putting those at retail value, meaning even if I went and fixed it myself for like $15,000 and it would have cost like $23,000, I'm putting in there that it was $23,000 because it's a legitimate fact. I'm not giving the value based on my craftsmanship that I did it. I'm going to value it as to what it would have cost somebody. You absolutely, any type of improvement you are going to put, because that's one step closer for that appraiser saying, well, this house has a lot of money in it. It's worth this value versus that. So yes, absolutely. Work meaning updates to the home, not repair work per se. Work meaning updates to the home. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely wanting to make sure that you're separating, putting the upgrades in there that make a difference compared to the average home out there. So that's a good point to make as well. I'm trying to think if I missed anything there. Such a generic overview, but believe me, it's very helpful. I guess I'll end with this, with the procedure standpoint. The appraisal comes in low. Once again, you have these choices. Your buyer either pays more, your seller either pays or agrees to take less. They agree to split in the middle, which is the most popular. The deal falls apart, or we try to persuade the appraiser via the lender to do the right thing. If those are your choices in place. That's what you're supposed to do. This is meaningless if you didn't do your comps prior to this process. And this is where a lot of you start to get exposed. When you start having an appraisal or having an appraisal issue, one of the first things when you all call me, and those of you who have done this before, you can attest to it, You call me and say, hey, look, we're short 20,000 on this appraisal. I'm like, how the hell did that happen? They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, didn't you comp that house? And then there's a pause. And then they're like, well, there was this one house. I go, where are the other two? I go, there's three. You have to have three. You can't just ignore them because they don't go your way. You have to have three. You have to be able to defend the value of the home that you're using and why you use that, because you're not going anywhere once that appraiser gets in there. There is a process that's in place. You have to get better at it. You have to be good at understanding, is this going to go through or not? Is this value right? Are we right? Now, we can all be right, both the agents, and it's the appraiser who's just a fool. And we'll address that at that point too. But I think everybody would agree here that if we're not right when we start, we ain't got a chance. Because if we're wrong, it means it only gets worse. So that's the key, is you have to know how to handle it and what process to go through, but you have to be the one that execute it in the manner that we asked you to do. If you don't, you're going to cause yourself a lot of problems. I want to thank everybody for watching. Our archive views continue to be ridiculously high. Appreciate everybody who takes time. Those of you who are live, appreciate y'all watching as well. Hopefully I got to everybody's questions. And again, Archive Watch, great show to push to a client who's not understanding the appraisal process. Great show to push to existing agents, especially the newer ones. This is a very big piece that a lot of people don't understand in the real estate world. Again, thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a great week. We will talk to y'all soon, and as soon as next week, right? See y'all then.
Take care.